That comment someone left on Facebook, it can get you sued. Australia's top court has said media companies can be held liable for replies to their posts, prompting some to step back from the platform. So this is a first in a 3-part series that we have on news coming from Australia, big media tech news. This is about a guy, Dylan Voller, who basically got really famous for, he was, I guess, in a juvenile detention center. There was a picture taken of him, went up on Facebook on a ton of Australian news outlets' pages. And the comments that were put on these photos were crazy. There's tons of accusations, just completely false, made about Mr. Voller. And he just sued the media companies directly. Didn't sue the commenters for, libel posts. Just kind of the argument, I guess, that he made and that the court decided on is that by putting out a Facebook page, which is basically a place for comments to happen, you're inviting comments and you're responsible for, taking down anything that's, basically either liable or what was the term? I forget exactly what he accused them of, but so this is kind of one thing that has just changed everything, because if you look at the DMCA, this is at the bottom of all of our websites. It's, it was put into place before the millennium, in 1998, kind of in anticipation of all this, basically said that, you're not liable for comments made or copyright issues made on websites. So, our hometown isn't liable for things that our publishers put up there or comments made on the website. And that's kind of the standard, that we're coming from in the US. But this is like setting a completely new precedent, this idea that publishers could be held liable for things happening on Facebook. So, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Any comments on whether this could work in the US or, because I feel like what's going to happen is most people will just disable comments or they'll just stop publishing on Facebook.
There's two things there. There's, first of all, the person has to take some responsibility for what they're putting out there. Okay. If you're going to put something out there, you have to expect comments. That's a reasonable action. Right. If you don't want it out there, if you don't want people commenting, don't put it out there. That's one. Right. And then the other option is, yes, turn off comments.
Right. Yeah. So that's the thing about this is, part 2 of this story. So this will be kind of like the second video. So let me, I guess, kick it off with an intro. Today in news tech, CNN disables Facebook comments in Australia after Voller decision. So as we said in the last video, this is almost an inevitable consequence of this new ruling, which I guess is, I don't know if it's a law yet or what the status of that is, but CNN's kind of anticipating that they're going to get sued, basically. So, and one interesting thing about this was, let's see, this was kind of funny to me. In a statement to the Sydney Morning Herald, CNN said it approached Facebook to see whether the platform would disable the comment functionality on its Australian pages, but the social media behemoth chose not to. So I guess you can't disable comments on your Facebook pages, or at least you couldn't at this time. And it's just so funny to me when you hear a story like this. It makes you realize what Facebook is. It's in so many ways they're just like our hometown. They have this platform, new situations come up, and they just haven't thought of anything. You kind of got to sympathize with them a little bit. They literally didn't have the functionality to disable comments because this pressure never existed. This issue, this precedent of being able to sue over comments. So as soon as that happened, now they have to change their technology. But so I just think it's kind of funny that we all just kind of assumed, oh, you can just disable comments. That's the solution, but it didn't actually exist. I think at one point in this article, they mentioned that they did introduce some ways to manage comments, but it seems like there's still no way to just turn them off completely. And goes back to Facebook, looking out for their best interests. They're trying, because their whole thing is comments. Their platform is fueled by commenting. If you couldn't comment on things, it's going to be a very passive experience. This is clearly an initiative of Mark Zuckerberg, to get people interacting with things. So they don't want to allow you to disable them. They'll allow you to moderate them. But, like you said, Terry, yes, if you're going to put something out there on a platform that's built for comments, you got to expect it. I think with organizations like CNN, they're so huge. They have so many followers. They just literally, they don't have the resources to police it. They're experiencing a problem that's at the level that Facebook has with just their general issue of content moderation. That's a never-ending battle for them too. I don't know if you guys follow that at all, but I hear about it in a lot of the podcasts I listen to. It's literally like, it's an arms race. They're using AI to detect things like, violence or pornography, but there's ways around it. The AI doesn't always get it right. There's some really weird things that happen. Actually, and we're going to talk about that in one of the videos this week on the Facebook files. So I don't want to get ahead of myself there, but yeah. So, any comments on this at all? I guess basically the solution here, we boiled it down to you just take yourself off of Facebook. That's really the only solution for these large media outlets. Probably the smaller ones that we work with that have 5,000 followers, they could moderate their comments given the right tools, and I think that there is a section here with, like I said, they talk about introducing more tools for moderation. But again, it's like these things didn't even exist until this court case happened. So
I think mostly the idea behind this whole thing is probably to force the big, the media giants to come up with a solution. It's
right.
The problem's been identified now, force them, not that they technically will get sued, but the potential is there. It's been identified. Now let's address it. Let's do something about it. Let's make these options available.
So you're saying, yeah, this fight in Australia, it's so unique that it's not happening in any other country. And it's really super anti big tech. It's led by, this guy, I forget his name, but he's the head of the Treasury down there. He's really tight with Rupert Murdoch. I remember reading a lot about this in February when, they shut down all news outlets on Facebook in Australia because it's kind of coming to a head. And that's actually our last story here. So I think we can maybe start to see some connections here. I'm not sure exactly, which comes first, but if you follow the money, I guess that's kind of like the rule, the guiding principle here. The third story on Today in News Tech, Facebook wraps up deals with Australian media firms, TV broadcaster SBS included. Okay, so this is a flashback to February of this year. We interviewed Cecile Werman on her article about this law. She was writing about it in Crosby, North Dakota, just kind of wondering how is this going to impact small, newspapers in Australia. How are they going to actually get paid? Because what was happening is, again, just to review that, we've got a video lower down on the YouTube page. But they basically, Australia said, you've got to pay the publishers for their content. And the idea was Facebook is profiting off of just having headlines and teasers and thumbnail images from news sources on their news feed. A lot of people get their news just by looking at the headline and the teaser, right? So they're getting content from the publisher that's right next to an ad on the news feed. So Facebook's making money off of this news feed, I guess is the argument. Publishers need to get paid. And, hearing this, I'm just like, how is this possibly going to work? How are we going to know? How are you going to calculate how much each publisher could be paid? How are the publishers going to know that they're getting paid fairly? How is Facebook going to set up, licensing deals with all these little publishers? And this is what, was inevitable. What's happening now? They basically sent an email to the industry. I don't know what it means. Facebook sent an email to the Australian Publishers Association or something, saying that they're done making licensing deals. So they've done it with a lot of the big organizations there, News Corp, the top ones that are already pretty well off, but a lot of the smaller publishers, this one specific TV broadcaster, SBS, just completely left out in the cold. There was no negotiation made. And the weird thing about the Australian law is that it says if a deal can't be reached for, an agreed upon licensing rate, the government's somehow going to force it, so that's going to be put to the test like immediately. I thought that would take a little bit more time to happen, but it's funny because, we could have just predicted this. It was an audacious goal, but I think it's interesting that they did strike some deals. Let's just go through this a little bit here. There's a couple details. So Australia is the only country with a law where the government may set the fees if negotiations between tech giants and news providers fail. That's what I was just saying. But the rejected companies are left with little recourse for the time being and are waiting for the government to review the law in 2022 as planned. I'm not sure what that means either. I guess they passed the law, but it probably wasn't, set to be implemented immediately. These things take time. So maybe in 2022 is like the deadline for when, they're going to force the rates on Facebook. Let's see here. Kind of already covered that. So there's just these publishers. This guy, Nick Shelton from Broadsheet Media, says this is clearly an attempt from Facebook to cap their exposure to independent publishers. This SBS is kind of like the one, I guess, leading this complaint, sort of. They're maybe one of the bigger broadcasters that kind of was left out of negotiations. Facebook declined to enter negotiations, but they did conclude a deal with Google. And it seems like I keep hearing that Google is cutting deals much more frequently and with smaller publishers. So, and the argument with that is this exact same thing as Facebook. Google's product is that, return of results. So, just to even have a teaser in there.
I think you have a whole branding issue coming in here too with the big tech companies, because when you look at the image each one of these companies projects, like right. Facebook, okay, all of a sudden Facebook looks like a bad guy, but here's Google jumping in and now they're the good guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely big PR issues with Facebook. Yeah, they seem to keep tripping over themselves. Google will trip over themselves, but then they seem to get on the right track. They seem to go with just paying the publisher. They kind of know that they've been getting away with murder for a long time, just stealing all this stuff and displaying half the article on Google News. And that was the article last week, right? Google News is now an RSS feed with minimal content. They're not displaying as much of the article.
Well, Google's had all kinds of initiatives for a while that they've been trying to use to, build up a good image for themselves. But
right.
Facebook's more slow and steady, and
right.
They have a perfect opportunity to set the bar low. I mean, they're in the position where if they're going to negotiate, they're going to set the bar low.
Right.
In their favor. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the way they're looking at it though is like, we haven't had to pay anything for this. So, we got to fight this as long as we can. At least that's, it seems to be what Facebook's doing. Because there's so much to say here. We'll get to some of the articles from This Week in Tech from the past week, but I think the stat was 30% of people that get their news from social media get it from Facebook. They're like the leader in terms of a news source. So they understand that they cannot lose this content. They're going to hang on as long as they can without paying for it. But I think, this is the beginning of something new. These two paragraphs are interesting. This outcome, is at odds with the government's intention of supporting public interest journalism. So, basically he's saying this is going to put the law to the test. This guy from Facebook, though, Hunter, it's funny. He says in an email to publishers that they continue to benefit from the clicks generated from Facebook, and recommended that they tap a new series of industry grants. So yeah, Facebook, I love that. They'll announce $1 million grant, meanwhile over here, they're making billions of dollars, each year off of the content. So, they try to fix it with the PR over here, but, really people are not leaving Facebook. They're just, this is kind of just a farce, and people are not really buying it. There is some traffic that comes, there's a significant percentage of our customers' traffic does come from Facebook. But if they didn't get as much from Facebook and they had to click through to, even see the whole headline or something, I think they'd get even more. So I guess my point is that people get their fill just from the news feed. And it's kind of like biting the hand that feeds you at a certain point. They are sending us traffic and they're cultivating the audience. So, I can kind of see Facebook's side of the argument too, but at the end of the day, if the publishers aren't able to support creating the news, they're kind of cutting themselves off, from their food source. Facebook would wither away anyway. So
there was a little blurb at the end of this article, Matt, that it meets its commitments to public interest journalism. I think that's the key right there, public interest journalism. Well, that's what separates the other stuff on Facebook or whatever platform from its regular content. When it turns into public interest journalism, like, your school happenings, a recent accident, a flood, the new hospitals built, things like that. Those are public interest things that really that the publisher should be compensated for that, in my opinion.
Right. Just because it's kind of like a public good sort of thing that, and
right, it's a public service. It really is, just like your public notices.
Well, yeah, I kind of think of it, they call it the fourth estate, right? It really is, kind of a part of the government, but it's weird. It's like the Federal Reserve. It's supposed to be like separate from the government, but
still
federal.
By.
Yeah, it's supposed to be independent and like a check and balance, but it is created by, the government. In the Constitution, the same idea with the fourth estate. It's there to be a check and balance on local government, especially. So, yeah. But anyway, let's get back to kind of the reaction videos that we've covered this week's news stories, the Australia news. That's all I had on that one. Let's check out this video. I don't know if any of you watched this. It's the first one in the playlist. I just rearranged the playlist. It's kind of just commenting on design. So let's watch this one real quick. Today in News Tech, prioritizing subscribers, not flyby readers. Skift is debranding. This article from NeimanLab.org starts with a tweet from Rafat Ali, the media owner and operator at Skift. He says, "We've debranded Skift. Our new design focused on reader experience. Now that we are a subscriber-first company, we can do things that simplify things radically for the readers." And he goes on to say, "I use the word debranded deliberately, not a misspelling of rebranded. radically simplify the design so the editorial and services we offer and promote for our partners shine through. Skift's co-founder, Jason Clampett, says, we've decided the two most important things are getting people to sign up for our newsletter and promoting our subscription product, Skift Pro. And so the redesign process focused on getting rid of most of the colors, all of the adornments, logos, crap like that, and just making it a nice reading experience. Thanks for watching Today in News Tech, the podcast covering innovation in digital journalism. I thought this was an interesting topic for our publishers. Let's just pull up our hometown and look at some of the designs. Do you guys have any reaction to that? I mean, the big take home I had is that they're designing to drive the user behavior rather than just designing for the sake of designing and trying to look like another site that you like. You know, they're trying to get people to subscribe and get on the newsletter. And that's just central to the whole layout. I'm going to look at Florida Weekly as a good example of this. I don't know, Terry, do you have any thoughts on that? Because like that, we talk about this a lot, right? It's a nice big subscribe button has got to be part of your thinking.
Right. And all the non-essentials like
right.
Contact us and all those things, those are at the bottom of the page or over in the flyout menu instead of across the top. When they redesigned this site, they took off so much. And they have a one guy there, Jim, he's got a great eye for what content should be promoted on, above the fold, so to speak.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm just going to change the layout.
Another thing that they are highly focused on at Florida Weekly is mobile. Your mobile experience.
Right. Let's just point out a few things here, though. I mean, this is a free paper, so they just got to do one thing: is get the newsletter sign up. And so they got free email edition sign up. You know, exactly what you put in that box is important. I'm sure they, thought a lot about the phrasing there. The button matches the design of the rest of the site. But other than that, it's white and black. It's blue, white, and black color scheme, or the style guide, is very straightforward for this. And what they talked about in that article a lot is how this is an increasing trend with brands, even like big brands like, Dunkin' Donuts. They've simplified their logo, taking out the shadows, they've changed the design of their retail locations, their restaurants to look, less like a, it's like brown and orange everywhere, just more like a regular building.
One thing that I always say, it's like you can tell when there's like a new graduate on staff that has just come from learning all these cool things and they're showing it off. It's like, get rid of it. Just get rid of it.
A new graduate at the paper. Yeah. Right.
It's like, okay, it's great that this is useless.
Right. I mean, let's talk about a specific example. Yeah, like all the bells and whistles. If you get a marketing person in at your paper, they may say, okay, first thing you need is your Facebook, your Twitter, your social media right at the top, your Instagram. We got to cram it all in there. Mm-hmm. But you got to think about what is the goal. The goal is ultimately to get people to the website.
Right.
So
why are people coming to your website?
Right.
They're coming to your website to see your Facebook icon? No.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think in that case, that's another thing like the contact us that you want to make easily accessible, but you put it in a place where people know where to get it. And most people are trained to go to the footer to get any contact info.
Right.
And almost all sites have the little icons there. This is a very popular layout. So, if they're already on your site, maybe they came from social media and you want to solidify that connection, then this would be how they could do it. But getting the email is kind of the ultimate connection, email or phone number. Right now, the email is like the start of a profile for someone, because then you can see how often they're opening your email, what links they're clicking on. We can start to match that up with the Matimo stats. So yeah, that's the goal of this. And just before we leave this, like you said, Terry, the mobile is really the focus. So that's more like a smartphone, just like on the desktop. The email sign up is the focus. So you got your masthead and then email sign up, real simple, just a
And
few
it's a
things you can do.
simple ad, and look at the content that's displayed above the fold.
Yeah, that ad really looks nice there. It blends in, and then you got this nice big story.
That's what you came here for.
Top news, right? It starts with the top news section, and then everything.
A normal person is going to look at that. Oh, good, they've got lots of stuff here. I can't get to it now. Go back up. There it is. It's still at the top. Let's sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah, that's right. The newsletter sign up is there the whole time. Yeah, that's a good point. So the fixed navigation, an important thing to think about when you're placing the buttons. Nice. And get the e-edition at the bottom. All right, very cool. Yeah, we're working on a project, like I was kind of mentioning earlier with Florida Weekly, with texting right now. So, that could become an element of the website. And again, just a priority of the design. So we'll come back to that once we have something in production. But let's go back to the video. I think that's good for that one. I was going to show you the Skift website, the topic of the video.
Nice.
Yeah, it is a really nice website. And it definitely reminds me a little bit of kind of like the Moab Times.
Times Independent.
Or the Times Independent too. Yep. But they kind of wanted this pretty much black and white. At the time, it was basically the New York Times design. Very similar to this. Let's just see if we can identify the priorities. Here's subscribing to Skift Pro. So basically a huge ad right up front for their subscription product.
What's it look like on mobile, Matt? Just curious.
I haven't seen the newsletter yet, but
boom, right there.
Yeah, that looks great. Yep. So you can subscribe now to...
And I think black and white says news. If you're looking for news, there it is. This is a news website.
Right. Kind of getting away from flashy videos popping up, colors, takeover ads, to be honest. I'm not the biggest fan of just like tons of color and images.
It's really distracting. Yeah.
Yeah. You can do that, but I think you want to do it temporarily. And this is like your ground base.
Funny, that's a Pantone color this year.
Oh, wait, what was that? The colors of the year?
Yeah, colors of the year, yellow and gray.
It was it. So I'm sure this guy, I'm familiar with this guy. I remember he used to produce a website called Paid Content. It was kind of like an industry publication. And I remember seeing him talk at a few trade shows.
There's last year's colors.
Yeah, I'm sure that he's watching all that research. He's just like...
Look at that. Last year's color, the blue and the coral.
Right.
This year's yellow and gray, and last year's blue and coral. Interesting play on the colors there.
Daily lodging report. So I think a lot of these are newsletters. Here's the newsletter emphasized in yellow. That's a really nice layout that he's got. He's got a lot of different formats. Here's your events section. He's got a podcast. We're kind of running out of time. Let's get back to our playlist here. I'm going to skip around and just show you guys some of the highlights. We had an interesting story with this national brand starting these local newsletters. So they're just creating newspapers, news organizations that are just newsletters. I don't think I'm going to watch that one, but it's an interesting one because I actually got an email this week from, I think it's called the Salt Lake Cast or something. Somehow I got on someone's newsletter and they're starting a podcast and a daily newsletter in Salt Lake City. And so I don't think it's associated with Axios, but there are these news organizations that don't even have websites. I mean, they're on social media. They have the newsletter is their CMS basically. And then your inbox, their subscribers inbox kind of serve as the CMS in the archives. It's bizarre, but people are getting creative, and we'll see that in another article from Africa later. But let's just look at this one about news consumption on social media, because I was talking about this earlier. I want you guys to get these stats. Today in News Tech, news consumption across social media in 2021. This report from the Pew Research Center says, among many things, more than half of Twitter users get news on the site regularly. At a higher level, about half, 48% of Americans get news on social media at least sometimes, which is down slightly from. In terms of where Americans are getting the most news, Facebook outpaces all the other social media sites. 31% of the U.S. adults polled said that they get news from Facebook. That's compared to 22% at most popular news. And then, okay, let's just pause it there. I think the one thing that I would take away from this article for our publisher partners is when you're setting up social media, start with Facebook. You know, it's a very simple take-home message because that's the most popular source for social media network for Americans to get news. YouTube is not really a practical option for most publishers because they're just not doing newscasts on video. But then the next one is Twitter. And this is kind of in alignment with what I recommended and just kind of what my gut was, you know, start with Facebook and Twitter. I think I mentioned that to you, Vera, you know, like those are the two to start with because, you know, when you're setting up social media auto posts, because those are the ones that are going to be sending traffic back to you. Instagram doesn't do that. And they're the most popular. So, you know, you can get quite a bit of an audience just by automatically getting all your stuff out there using some tool. We have one built into WordPress. There's different ones out there. But yeah, that's kind of the take home that I got from this article. There's a little bit more here. All right, let's finish this one up. And then it drops off pretty quickly when you get down to newer social. I did find it interesting that the percentage of Americans who regularly get news from these sites is pretty much unchanged. On Facebook, it's declined slightly from 2020 from 36% to 31%. It seems like not all audiences on these social networks are the same. Some sites stand out as being more newsy. For example, Twitter is used by 23% of adults in the US, but half of those users, 55%, get news on the site regularly. Compare that to YouTube, it's 30% of the users that get news on the site. Thanks for checking out Today in News Tech, the podcast on innovation in digital. The last thing that I mentioned is that Twitter has this reputation for being more newsy. So I guess what I took away from that is people that get their news on Twitter are just much more engaged, you know, so it is a good place to get your content, even though it's not the most popular source for across the whole US, you know, or this sample set. The people that are on there are much more engaged and clicking on news links. They're more interested in news.
I think that article also mentions that the users on Twitter are younger. They're more like your college level.
Right.
40 type people.
Yeah. Was that one of these graphs?
I think it's in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. A lot of these have.
The article that wasn't really answered was, what type of news are we getting? What type of news is this talking about? I think Twitter focuses a lot more on your national news.
Right. That's a good point.
Facebook is more your local news.
Right. Totally.
When people are looking for news, they're going to go to Facebook because that's where they live. You know what I mean? It covers the area. Whereas if you go into Twitter, you're going to look for more on a national level type thing. Especially during the elections. I think that was mentioned in here.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's really good point. That does kind of match with what I would have guessed, but I don't think they did break that down in this.
No, they didn't break it down. Yeah.
Right. There is another article I'm kind of reviewing right now that looks at how local news has been. Well, this focuses exclusively on local news, so that's not really the answer either. The take home here is you don't really need to worry about, especially for local news, like people are not really getting it from TikTok or Snapchat. I mean, people that are really, they might, you know, if there's a big national brand on their news feed, you know, they might watch the video, but they're not. I think the people that are on those platforms are not really engaged with local news through those platforms, and they're not. It's
more for entertainment.
Yeah, they don't want to. Right. It's not that younger people don't want local news. It's just that TikTok is not really for news right now. At least it's not. hasn't been accepted by that platform. Maybe one day it will be, and maybe the national news brands will kind of lead the way. But when it comes to just prioritizing resources, you just got to get a link to your website on Facebook and Twitter. That's the bottom line. If you can do it with an automated tool, great. If you have to post it yourself, then that's fine. But what you don't want to be doing is just posting full content there, posting image galleries on Facebook. You always want to link back to the website, because this is saying that there is an audience for news on these platforms, but we've still got to get them back to the website for them to really become our customer. Let's just look at the Facebook files here. This is kind of a big story from the Wall Street Journal. It was last week that it came out, and they highlighted these 5 stories in this series about, these documents that they got from Facebook, internal documents. And 2 of them applied especially to news publishers. And I thought it might be interesting to discuss. So let's take a look at this. Today in News Tech, the Facebook files. This series of articles from the Wall Street Journal says that Facebook knows in acute detail that its platforms are riddled with flaws that cause harm, often in ways only the company fully understands. That is the central finding of a Wall Street Journal series based on a review of internal Facebook documents, including research reports, online employee discussions, and draft presentations to senior management. Time and again, despite congressional hearings, its own pledges, and numerous media exposés, the company did not fix these issues identified by their own researchers. The documents offer perhaps the clearest picture thus far of how broadly Facebook's problems are known inside the company, up to the chief executive himself. Today, we are going to highlight 2 of the stories in this series that are especially relevant to news publishers. The first story, Facebook says its rules apply to all. Company documents reveal a secret elite that's exempt. Mark Zuckerberg has said Facebook allows its users to speak on equal footing and that its standards apply to everyone. In private, the company has built a system that has exempted high-profile users from some or all of its rules. The program, known as Crosscheck or Xcheck, was intended as a quality control measure for high-profile accounts. Today, it shields millions of VIPs from the company's normal enforcement, the documents show. And the second story we want to highlight, Facebook. All right, I just want to pause there for a second. This first one is interesting to me. And I listened to the whole podcast on this, and they gave me all the background on how big celebrity accounts get flagged for certain things that they would post, and they would automatically get taken down by the software, and it would create all these problems. They gave an example of like Rihanna posting some risque photo of herself. The AI flagged it as inappropriate, and her account got disabled. So they basically they created this, they just wrote some software that says, these people, if we just put a checkbox here, they don't get automatically banned for things, because that creates too many problems. But then what that ended up creating, it's like so many unintended consequences at system at this scale. There was some famous soccer player who later posted something, some pictures of another woman, that he was with, and he had access to pictures of her. He posted it on a live stream. Normally that would have gotten flagged immediately, and the live stream would have been terminated. But it actually took weeks to get that video taken down, because he was on this list of Crosscheck. So this, to me, set the stage a little bit for something that we're going to talk, basically the wildfire that is fake news. Because what can happen with this is, even when Facebook has certain things that they're going to censor, they decide we're just going to censor any false information about the vaccine. It's debatable whether that is even appropriate to do. But even if they want to make some control and put some censorship in their platform, they have these people out there. And some of them are probably super right wing, and they might post some anti-vaccine thing, and it's marked as appropriate, this person's account is a VIP. So it just stays out there, and then it grows like a wildfire. People and share it. And effectively, it wasn't censored at that point, because everyone's seen it now. the damage is done. So I just feel like this, along with the next story here that I'm going to show you, I think created a lot of the fake news problems that we saw in the last few years. Now, let's hear about this other story. And the second story we want to highlight, Facebook tried to make its platform a healthier place. It got angrier instead. There was the 2018 change designed to improve the platform, but really it was designed to reduce signs of declining user engagement. Mr. Zuckerberg declared his aim was to strengthen bonds between users and improve their well-being by fostering interactions between friends and family over interactions with company, brands, profile pages. Within the company, the document shows staffers warned the change was having the opposite effect. It was making Facebook and those who used it angrier. Zuckerberg resisted some fixes proposed by his team because he worried they would lead to people interacting with Facebook less. Thanks for checking out. Okay, so there was kind of a lot packed in there, and I just want to give you guys some context. I don't know if you remember, but this was a big news story in 2018 when Facebook changed their algorithm to take the emphasis off of what you saw, basically take the weight off of company pages and put more weight on personal connections, your friends and family that you're connected with, other users, not like brands, like, for example, newspapers. So they put more weight on those comments, which meant you were more likely to see those things in your news feed. And this was a big deal for newspapers because I remember a lot of them were freaking out because they had kind of gotten used to a ton of traffic coming from Facebook. Now, all of a sudden, they are downgraded in their in the feed. They're not seen as much. And so their traffic from Facebook plummeted. And they were talking about this at a lot of conferences, and the big take home I got from that is Facebook can do that at any time. You shouldn't depend on these platforms. You can use them, but at the end of the day, you want to capture someone's email because that is how you control the communication. And so that's where so many of our arguments and our, demonstrations about newsletters came from, the importance of the newsletter. But anyway, they made that change. And so what ended up happening is you just ended up seeing more things from friends from high school that you have no connection with anymore. Their political views maybe are completely different than anything you would imagine they would have become. And so people, after 2018, they just started seeing more stuff from their friends. And on top of that, I think this other change where a message from Trump, he was definitely on this list, X check. People like him, his family, people in his administration, just people on that side. Things can just blow up so quickly with circumstances like this. So I just found it kind of interesting. This is not really an actionable thing on the part of newspapers, but I do think that there may be an opportunity here, growing opportunity to fight Facebook on the local level with newspapers, building a community around the newspaper. At our hometown, we're looking at tools to facilitate that, to kind of create local social networks. I just think that they're easier to manage. Just these things that Zuckerberg is dealing with, like, I don't envy the guy. Like, these are like really tough problems to solve. His company has gotten so big so quick, and it's encountering issues that you could have never even imagined. Could there be an opportunity for a newspaper to replace Facebook on the local level? Terry, Tyler, Vera, any thoughts on that?
Well, I wish them all the best if they do.
Yeah, because then they're going to have to be doing all this moderation.
Exactly.
I don't know if everyone's going to want to do that. I think maybe there are some publishers that'll be up for it. Like, we've met with publishers. There's this one in New Jersey who kind of has created his own social network in a way. So if we could, work with publishers like that and just make the interface a little bit more like Facebook, make it really easy for people to put content up there. I don't know. It may also be like opening, a can of worms that we're just not prepared to deal with. So
yeah, I would proceed with caution for sure. It's kind of like
Right.
co-signing a loan for somebody that you don't know,
Right.
just way too risky.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, even the most basic things, like I'm just thinking prioritizing what shows up in everyone's feed. Those are all decisions that have to be made, because there's going to be, like, especially on Facebook, there's so much content that you could be seeing. They're editing what you're seeing all the time. They're deciding, of the million posts that this guy could potentially see, based on all the pages he's liked, all the things that his friends have liked, that he might want to see too. Facebook probably has a profile on every user that says, they might be interested in these things, and then they weight them.
And that's what I think Facebook is doing. It's becoming so human that it's making decisions without a human element to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
Facebook is taking over Zuckerberg.
It's a crazy thing. I don't think many people really realize how,
actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, they are kind of, for some people that get like all their information there, they're kind of controlling what their reality is. Like what they decide to show people, they don't show them. I mean, it's, for a lot of people, like, this is where they're getting all their information now. So it's a huge responsibility. It's a complex issue. We're kind of at the periphery of it.
And then throw in the whole thing of free speech. Throw that into the mix, and that makes for some real scrambled eggs there.
Oh yeah, no, nothing has been settled by any stretch. It's all like still being worked out. There's just the most basic debate of if Facebook is a publisher or platform that they're making, they're censoring people, then they're claiming that they're not responsible. Then you got governments suing like the users of Facebook, basically publishers. There's two types of users on Facebook, really. There's the people with profiles, and then there's people like our hometown, where we create a Facebook page and we put things up there. It's just everyone's getting sued. Governments trying to figure out how to develop tools to deal with this. The tools don't exist. There's no like legislation they can crank up, to reel these companies in. Yeah. So I think that's probably a good one to end it on. There's some other interesting videos from last week about how, like, New York Times is using more images with Twitter slides and Instagram slides and Twitter cards. They're embedding them in their stories and just trying to tell stories more with images. And then there's other publications like this one in Africa, where they are just publishing through basically a newsletter, an email newsletter. They send out a PDF. It's designed for mobile. And then they're also just like basically on WhatsApp and Signal. So there's sort of a lot like the story we covered earlier on launching newsletters. They're just trying to fight fake news on these platforms by putting out a legit looking PDF that's mobile friendly. It's kind of a cool story if you check that out.
It does sound really cool. I like the
it's a creative use of it's all free technology, and they're a nonprofit. So maybe that's the way.
We've already established email and newsletters aren't going anywhere.
Right. Yep, exactly. And these tools are very mobile centric. I mean, email's a mobile platform.
Right.
This
safe.
publication.
That's the key word, is it's safe.
Yeah, right.
Pretty much it's free from all this Facebook, Google legislation stuff.
Yeah, and it's direct relationships that they're creating with people. When they get a subscriber on WhatsApp, they have their WhatsApp username or their phone number. So they don't need to publish on Facebook to get information to that person.
It's more personalized, it seems.
Yeah. It's definitely taking more control of their destiny. Definitely
personalized in a good way, as opposed to
right. Yeah.
The reader actually chooses it. It's not coming from an algorithm.
Right. Yep. And this is like I was talking with Tyler and Chris this morning, kind of the goal of Today in News Tech with our newsletter. We want to be out there on social media, but at the end of the day, if you can get their email, that's where the relationship begins. So if we can provide a good service by highlighting these stories, what's going on, all the way from big tech down to, small community newspapers, they'll start to kind of turn to us as just like industry experts, certainly, but really just more like on the cutting edge of everything and trustworthy, learning from, the mistakes and the successes of others. We're looking at what the New York Times does and everything. And then we get their email and basically then we start pitching them on doing their website or doing anything that we can, to kind of further their goals. It could be third-party audio playlists, could be apps. So yeah, this is going to be a new part of the marketing team's toolbox. So we'll let you guys go for now. I appreciate all the feedback on this. We'll turn this into an extended chat for streaming this weekend. All right.
Been fun.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you all later.
Thanks. Talk to you later.